Hello, my name is Eva and I run the account Notation is Great on Twitter. So one question that people sometimes ask is, when did modern notation really come into being? And obviously that's not an easy question to answer because, as you can imagine, it's not as if this happened overnight. So the truth is, if we go back as early as the 15th century, you can still pretty much recognize a lot of the symbols that you see on scores. But really, it's only from the 17th and especially the 18th century that when you look at a score, there's a high chance that you'll be able to read most of it. Of course, I'm not counting here some special cases like tablatures, but as far as staff notation is concerned, I think there's a pretty strong chance that you'll be able to read most of it. You might still, however, find a few signs or a few things that you not might fully understand, and so in this video and also in the next one I'll be covering some of those little anomalies of musical notation. So the first examples I'd like to discuss come from Virginal books from the 17th century. So the Virginal was a very popular instrument at the time, especially in England. And this is from Elizabeth Rogers' Virginal book, which is part of the collections at the British Library. So is there anything here that looks a bit odd? Yeah, so maybe you've guessed that each staff has 6 lines. So this is not uncommon at the time. So each staff has 6 lines. And this is, as far as I understand, this is also partly because of the influence of lute tablatures, which could have 6 lines, with each line being one course of the instrument. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, you might notice something also slightly odd there. So as you can see there, you have 2 signs which look like clefs in the upper voice and another 2 in the lower voice. Yeah, so each of these staffs has 2 clefs in it. So the upper voice has G and C and the lower voice has F and C. And you can ask, well, why give you 2 clefs? Because one is enough, and it's true. But I suppose it's also a question of, like the more lines you have, maybe the more difficult it will be to remember which note is which. And actually, 2 clefs is something that we find sometimes in medieval music as well. So it goes back to the Middle Ages. And by the way, this is not the Virginal book with the most lines in the staff. Some of them have as many as 12 lines. I mean, that looks a bit confusing to me. Let's go back to the Rogers Virginal book for 1 minute. So you see that in the right hand, the notes are grouped in groups of 4 quavers, and at the end of each group, each of the notes has like a sort of little tick or flag. So what is this? Well, this is actually the flag of the note. So nowadays, when you have 2 or more quavers or semiquavers, one right after the other, normally you group them so the flag of the first note becomes more horizontal and it's tied to the next one, and so on. But the flag in the last note just disappears. So this was not the case at the time, okay? So you can still see the last flag of the last note. And here's another example from Ganassi's Fontegara, which is this famous collection of divisions for recorders. I'm going to move on to a couple of Bach examples. So the first one is from the Musical Offering, from the Richard Carr Assay. So I posted this a couple of weeks ago in my notation account, and one follower asked, so why is it that the upper voice and the lower voice are in different keys? So 4 flats in the upper voice and 5 in the lower voice. Now, this is not an early example of polytonality, but it has to do with conventions regarding how key signatures were notated. So if we look at the upper voice, we'll see that, of course, we've got the B flat first, but then if we move on to the E flat, we'll see that it's notated twice. So on the bottom line and then on the top space, so meaning that both E's are flat, and then the A is notated only once. If we move on to the left hand, we'll see that the B is notated twice, the E is notated only once, and the A is notated twice. So in other words, you notate the sharps or flats like as many times as the staff allows you. Some of them will appear twice in the signature, while some of them will appear only once. Finally, this is my favorite example. So this is from one of Bach's organ sonatas. And if you look at the end of each of the lines, you'll see that there are little ticks or V signs at the end of each of these. And they are also in different places in each of the voices. So what does this mean? Well, this sign is called a custos. Custos in Latin means guardian. And this is in fact a very old type of sign that you find from the Middle Ages onwards. And basically it tells you what the next note of the next line is going to be, okay? So in the Middle Ages, you can see a couple of examples here. The custos was especially useful because sometimes the clef would change from one line to another without any warning, without a double line or anything like that. So obviously it was quite useful at that time. So in Bach's time, you don't have these sudden clef changes, but I suppose they kept using it because of tradition or because they thought it was useful for the performer. And it always reminds me of my choir conductor who always tells us, please write down the note you have on the next page, especially if it's an unexpected leap or an unexpected interval, please do that. So in those cases, I suppose it could be quite useful to have a custos printed on the score, but we can still add our own custos. This is the first of two videos I will be making on anomalies of musical notation from the 17th century onwards. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I would like to invite you to consider making a donation to one or more charities or funds for musicians affected because of the COVID-19 crisis. And you can see a couple of links below. Other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Bye and thank you.